So it's been a while since I posted, but you gotta come back for Halloween and do some horror games. I'm Mike. I sometimes do video game reviews on this channel, and I do intend to get caught up on some other games after Halloween. And today we're doing the Evil Within 1 and 2 review. Evil Within is a fairly solid action horror series with a lot to offer. So we'll start out with Evil Within 1. Going into Evil Within 1, I knew the game was by the guy who led development on the original RE4. But this was before I played the original RE4. So I was definitely significantly less disappointed by this game than a lot of other people. Even though this game doesn't really live up to RE4, it is still a fairly good game. The gameplay is sort of like a then modernization of RE4 in a way, but a bit grittier. But with that being said, now that I played RE4, something about it isn't quite as good. I think it's mainly that it's going for a more horror feel. The enemies are stronger. There's no shooting to melee combos. But it's also not quite a full survival horror, and it's a kind of awkward middle ground. Going a bit into more depth of the gameplay, there's good weapon variety, the weapons all have good feel, there's a fairly good weapon upgrade and skills system. There's also these one-hit kill, one-time use melee weapons, and a burning bodies mechanic. Both those are decent. The stealth is okay, which is fine in regular gameplay, but a bit more of a problem in the more horror-based sections. But it's not terrible. There's not very good enemy variety, and the bosses are kind of mediocre in gameplay-wise. The story's decent, but not great. It does set up a fairly interesting world with this Matrix simulation, but it's one guy's in control of it, and it's horror themed. There's also good Resident Evil style archetypal characters, which are good. The aesthetics are generally pretty good, with some classical horror locations like the asylum and the village, but grimier. But there is this extended section in a gray crumbling city area that goes on for a bit. That's not great. There's also some fairly good enemy design with the bosses, and also the song, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Claire de Lune is used very well. Even though it's a classical song and it's used a lot of other places, I always think of Evil Within when I hear it. Overall, it's a good game, even though it's not per se a great game. I'm giving it a 7.95. Now moving on to Evil Within 2. Evil Within 2 is a pretty big step in quality from the first game. The shooting is still good, but the gameplay is more solidly in the action horror camp. So it feels a lot better and is a decent step up. The weapons and upgrades are still good. There's a new crafting system which fits in pretty well with the rest of the gameplay. There's a bit more enemy variety. The bosses are fairly good this time. This time the levels are mainly small open worlds, which works pretty well. They feel fun to explore with no filler areas. This also introduces side quests, which are really good, and they feel like they could have been part of the main game. So I would recommend making sure you play them all. The story is also a fairly big step up, with Sebastian trying to save his daughter being a more interesting story than just trying to survive. He and Kidman are more fleshed out characters in this, and you feel more of their motivations. There are also some good new characters in the same story style of the first game. And since this time the simulation was intentionally made by the evil Illuminati type group, the new characters are parts of that group, and so there's some interesting things about how they've been coerced to work for them and regret a lot of things. The story also has a good conclusive end, which is good because the Evil Within Easter eggs in Hi-Fi Rush are probably about as close as we're going to get to an Evil Within 3 for a while.
Another day, another mess that needs to be cleaned up. The cost of progress, it looks like. This is gonna be bad for morale. Can't see anybody liking this. Surprised no one put a claim in, but I need to take this to the top.
The environments are good all the way through this time, with things like the corrupted utopian small town of Union and the evil dungeon section. There's still good enemy and boss aesthetic design. Overall, Evil Within 2 is a classic example of how a sequel should improve upon its predecessor if it needs to. Overall, I'm giving Evil Within 2 an 8.74. Overall, Evil Within is a fairly good action horror series worth checking out. Thank you to anyone who likes, comments, or subscribes. That's it.